What is going on, everybody? This is Minus here from Pantheon Plus, and today we talk about the ailment build that I've been working on for quite some time, and I think I finally have it locked down. So with that said, let's go ahead and lay out the video. First, we're going to jump into the passive tree and talk about where we've spent points so far. From there, we'll talk about our skill points and how we've distributed them, and what main stats we're looking for in this build. Third, we're going to actually dig into the active skills that we use, showing what we think is best and where you may have some options. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about gear. And when we do, we're going to break into a little bit of theory crafting for you sorcerers out there. As you guys have probably seen, a lot of the builds are melee or hybrid out there right now that are quote unquote meta. But when you watch videos from me, that's really not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to create interesting and fun builds to play that maybe aren't pushing the top tier content, but can still provide pretty powerful results. So without further ado, let's jump into the Burn Baby Burn ailment build. Now, what's taken me so long to make this video is that I wanted to level up enough and get enough play and test time in to really understand how the different abilities worked and where the weaknesses were. On the screen, you're going to see our passive setup for this Burn Baby Burn build, and you'll see that we're actually within 6 different tiers or trees. That begins with the Kabbalist into the Oracle of the Trinity, into Time Weaver, and then we actually jump into some of the melee style abilities for the survivability aspects that are heavily needed, especially as you push higher tiers. We'll jump into Siegebreaker for an unstoppable passive that you have to have, and down into Praetorian and Soldier for some more life, resistances, and block that will help us in the build. So let's jump into the key abilities within the passive tree. You'll be starting with Attrition Strategist, which gives you 60% more ailments chance score, a huge part of our build. From there, you'll be going into Power of the First Men. This gives you 50% chance to multiply the number of ailment stacks inflicted by 2. The next skill is Immortal Offering, which gives you 5% damage for each ailment stack on an enemy you've killed, and this stacks up to 5 times. While this is strong in solo play, it's even more advantageous in group play, as the ailments your group members put on will also stack onto this effect. Keeping in the theme of dropping more and more ailments, this next ability, Insidious Decay, will actually allow you to add +2 ailment stacks inflicted to enemies. Now this does come with a negative, as you will receive negative 30% damage to any damage that is not damage over time, but this is well worth the loss. At the moment, this next skill is a bit controversial, as in-game it is not functioning properly. However, when it does, and it's on the list of things to fix, it will be an unstoppable talent that will be needed in this build. So for the time, we're just going to grab it and wait for the fix. This will allow your critical hits to deal critical damage on your damage over time. This is a massive, and I repeat, massive boost to your damage when it is appropriately working. And the final in the Kabbalist tree is the Grievous Afflictions. This will allow you to play +1 additional ailments, which essentially means each spell will have the chance to do 2 ailments instead of 1. Now we'll be jumping into Oracle of the Trinity, and this one is Elementary Destabilization. Basically, when your willpower is below 30% of its maximum, you have a chance to cause an explosion. It deals damage based on your Force Shield or your health, depending on which you'll use, and it regenerates some of your willpower with a cooldown of about 5 seconds. Staying in the same tree, we'll pick up the skill Omni Tempest. This will allow fire skills to launch a meteor. Now it also affects lightning and frost skills, but we pretty much only use fire. So this is going to give us a large meteor to drop from the ground to just add passive AoE damage during the fights. Next is Ancient Fervor. This is a buff type ability that will randomly generate buffs on you as you continue to deal damage. Now we're going to jump into the Time Weaver tree, into an ability called Which Time Cannot Heal. This is a massive damage boost. Essentially, once attacking an enemy with stasis, they will take 100% of the hit damage once again after a 1.5 second delay, essentially doubling all your base damage that you deal to an enemy. And now we're going to jump into 2 more large passive nodes, but these are both going to be for survivability. The first, within Siegebreaker, is probably one of the best abilities you can pick up for the points spent. Because we're going to be wearing heavy gear, which we'll talk about later, this will essentially double the bonus of the chest piece for all resistances, which can be a huge boost to your overall resistances from just this one piece. The passive right beside this will also allow you to get the same benefit from your headpiece. And finally, we will go into the Praetorian tree, which we will grab Kingless Aegis, and this will give you a +6% added block chance, but also allow any weapon to block. This will help us greatly when we're in close for combat or taking a big shot. We won't talk very long about the statistics side of it, but we've made Wisdom our primary due to its ailment chance score, and Ferocity our secondary to get crits. As we've said before, one of our passive nodes is not yet working to make our dots crit, but the crit's still very helpful in the normal attacks and application attacks. In the future, this will be huge whenever the dots are ticking crits as well. We've also put a tiny bit into toughness, but nothing really worth saying, and all of our agility is from gear at this point, or just base stats. Okay, with your passive abilities out of the way, let's get into our active skills. We'll be going through the modifiers we've selected from top to bottom, left to right. The first is Anomaly, one of our most powerful spells, and honestly, one of the coolest spells in the game. We've gone with the abilities as seen to increase the area of damage, increase the ailment damage, increase the skill duration, increase the percent status ailment score for chance. We've increased the critical hit chance. We've allowed us to cast 2 vortexes, which is a massive amount of damage. We've taken plus 30% critical damage, and we've allowed ailment damage to enemies inside the vortex to be increased. Obviously, that plays well with the passes we've chosen. Next, we'll have Solar Fall. This is another really important ability that can be used quite often and should almost have constant uptime. We've converted the damage into fire damage for more damage. We've increased ailment chance score. We've increased the critical damage. We've allowed the spell itself to become static when cast into a location, which is extraordinarily useful for our build and a must-have. We've increased the critical hit chance score, and we've increased the overall ailment damage. You can see where we're going with ailment damage and chance. Third, we're going to be into the tier of Ethereal. In this ability, we have taken the overall damage increase of 10%, which also converts the damage to fire. We've taken the chance to increase ailments. We have altered the skill so that it deals damage over time. We have increased critical damage, and we have increased our ailment damage. Now, this fourth ability, Eclipse, is totally up in the air, and you can kind of pick what you want for this slot. There's good reasons to pick Eclipse, also Bulwark, and also Fireball. So any of those skills can fit in pretty well, or if there's just something you really like, you can throw it in here. But we've gone with Eclipse pretty much for the fact that it can stun and really help us out of sticky situations when we're in close. Our attributes that we've picked here are reducing the willpower cost, the cooldown, increasing and inflicting stun on enemies, again reducing cooldown, average damage plus 50%, and increased ailment damage. Aether Jump is super important to have mobility within this build, and it will be important to get in and out quick of fights if we are going to be in close from time to time. We've taken willpower cost reduction, the increase in teleport range. We also took the modifier which allows us to deal damage between enemies as we teleport, doing burn stacks and stasis damage. When enemies are near the beginning end of teleport are also affected with stasis. We've taken the ability to leave a decoy behind, and we've taken probably the most important one, which allows us to cast it multiple times with no cooldown. However, each recast will cause more willpower to be used. And for our final ability, we take Infinity Blades. Now, we do have one more point to spend here, which we're going to use to increase our average damage, but let's go ahead and read through how we've built this. We'll have more willpower on kill and on our critical hits. We will actually add to our ailment damage. We will increase the damage for each ailment on a target, which plays very nice with our build. We will apply a debuff, which increases the damage taken by spells, again, comboing very well with what we're doing. And finally, we will increase block chance while casting. This will help us stay alive when we're in close. So if your eyes have wandered to the gameplay as we've talked about the passive and active skills thus far, you'll see that it's a fairly simple playstyle which can do massive amounts of damage. You'll want to ensure that you get enemies rounded up as best as possible, and you can do so with the double cast of Anomaly. The other part of this though is that you'll want to drop your Solar Flare into the middle of the Anomaly so that you're doing extra damage on the stacked enemies. Next, in similar fashion that you have with your Solar Flare, you'll drop your tier ability right in place as well. So you're essentially using Anomaly to stack enemies and drop 2 area effects on top of them. From there, you leap in with your Infinity Blades, gaining back any willpower you may need and doing massive damage while adding to the stacks of ailments. At any time, if you need to stun the enemies in front of you or push them back, you can use Eclipse, which is very helpful in any times you may get in trouble. Rinse and repeat as your skills come off cooldown, and make sure to restack enemies as much as you can with Anomaly. Now let's talk gear and a little bit of theory crafting. So the only unique item that I think you would really want to chase after for this build is one called Shadow Call. Now this is important. I actually wear 2 of these because it increases our ailment damage, our ailment chance score, increases our wisdom, but most importantly at the bottom here, you're going to see that it gives you a % chance to spread ailments to enemies around the target hit. This is really nice for splash damage because it's splash on splash, and it just causes ailments to really go crazy as you're pulling everybody into the middle and slicing away with your infinity blades. Okay, now that was the easy part. Let's get a little more into the difficult concepts. First, we've seen a lot of people complaining about the ability to use a staff versus using a catalyst and a main hand weapon, and this is mainly because of gems and the such. Now, a lot of people don't understand, and honestly, I don't think Wolcen's team has done a great job of explaining why it's beneficial to use a staff. There's a lot of things on a staff that just aren't really important, while others are. Now, for myself, I like the mana transfer time because I always want to be able to use my abilities, and since willpower generation is not a huge issue, I just want to make sure that I'm constantly regenerating willpower and it's not sitting there trying to regenerate rage as I am trying to regenerate my willpower. Yeah, that's a bit confusing, but it does make sense. So a staff is going to help you regenerate your willpower quickly and get rid of the time reduction in between, which is important. And then we'll be regenerating a lot of willpower with our infinity blades. So here's the thing though, the damage for a spellcaster up in the top weapon means absolutely nothing. I've tested a ton of different things with this, and really that just helps you on your basic attacks, which in this build you'll never be doing. Now the interesting thing is all that seems to really add to your damage are the gems that you see inside there, or the rolls that you see on the bottom, which add X damage to spells. Now we've tried a bunch of different things in making sure this was the right way. We've tried percent damage, we've tried percent elemental, we've tried percent fire. None of the percent damage modifiers really do much. If I'm going to be honest with you, I'd actually avoid them on almost all my gear and simply stick to defense, all resistances, HP, transfer time reduction, cost reduction, and then these damage stats when you can. Now on a yellow staff, you can have 2 damage stats on the bottom rolled, as well as 3 slots. On a red weapon, you can have 3 slots, but also 3 damage abilities at the bottom. You can completely ignore the total damage on the weapon as it means nothing up there at the top, but what is important is the item level. As you see, my item level is a 151 staff. That essentially means that at the bottom, when I roll damage on my spells, those 46 to 57, as you see for fire damage there, have a higher end cap and a higher lower cap. So the higher the item level, the better your rolls are, and that's essentially all that matters when you're looking at an item. Now another quick note I want to throw out there, and I don't have any pictures to show, so I'll just talk about it, is that as a sorcerer, one of the most disappointing things with the way the game is set up is that the sorcerer gear and the rogue gear are honestly 100% worthless. You would think that as a sorcerer you would want to wear sorcerer gear, but it's just not the case. Force Shield is just not strong. Because if you wore an entire setup of sorcerer gear, you would effectively have 0 resistances because you get no resistance score on any of your gear, with the exception of maybe some blue rolls, but you really can't afford to give that up. You're essentially giving up health and resistances for Force Shield, which is essentially unmitigated damage, and oh by the way, if you don't take the right talent, all dot damage goes straight to your health anyway. At this moment in the game's development, Force Shield is totally worth avoiding, and it also gives you a lot of passives to use in other things like health and hull resist, as we've done in this build, where you can just ignore all the Force Shield improvements. So unfortunately, my advice to anyone who wants to play a sorcerer, or probably anything, is to stick to heavy gear mainly, with some bruiser gear depending on the stats. It's kind of unfortunate this is the case, and I'm really hoping something changes to make Force Shield a more powerful solution, but at the time in this build, we're running 90% heavy gear with a couple pieces of bruiser gear. This has us in the mid 70s in resistances and allows us to be in close for battle. Thanks for watching our Burn Baby Burn video, and if you do like our content, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Pantheon Plus. Until next time.